Welcome back to the Boo Review. My name is AJ, and today we're going to be having a look at the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, who remains a hot topic of cryptozoological debate over 50 years from his initial sighting in November of 1966. My wife and I recently just got back from a trip to West Virginia where we went through Point Pleasant and visited the Mothman Museum and a lot of the Mothman associated sites. We'll get to those details later. First, let's talk about the actual story of the Mothman as presented by Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallette. One late night on November 15th, 1966 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallette, had an encounter with a mysterious figure on the road near the old power plant in what was called the TNT area, an abandoned US Ordinance complex, when they stopped the car and everyone looked to see the mysterious figure shamble into the darkness behind a part of the building. When they kept going, they saw it on a hill where it flew straight up into the air and followed behind the car at speeds of up to 100 and 105 miles per hour. After returning to town, the two couples discussed what they had seen and decided to go to the police. However, Steve and Roger insisted they would never believe them, and they turned around to confirm what they had seen. Okay, so this is one of the more noble aspects of the story, is they saw something weird, and before they told anybody about it or went to authorities, they decided to go back and try to confirm what they had seen. Now, they do almost immediately, I don't want to say immediately, they do backpedal on this along their way back. On their way, they see, if I recall from the story, they see a dead German Shepherd on the side of the road, and they're on their way back, and then they decide better of trying to hunt down this creature that they've seen. And on their way back, they do note that the German Shepherd, the dead dog they saw on the side of the road, was missing.
Maybe Mothman eats roadkill.
After they had turned around, this thing jumped out from behind something and leaped over the car and went through the field on the other side of the road. On returning to town, the two couples talked to the police, and together they returned once more to the power plant. After some time, they heard the squeaking sounds like a mouse, only louder and stronger, and glimpsed red eyes in the lights and informed Deputy Millard Halstead, who shined his light on the eyes as it took off. After returning home, the couple stayed together that night, not sleeping. So on their third encounter of the night, this is the first time we get mention of the red glowing eyes, which will become a staple of the Mothman look in mythology. It's also where we get the first mention of the sound of the Mothman, which they reference as being like the squeak of a mouse. I'm gonna go ahead and call that one a unique feature right there. It's kind of a why. If you were going to make it up, why that? I think this is from Linda's report. Maybe that's just the scariest shit to Linda is a mouse, and maybe she's just projecting her deepest, darkest fears onto this encounter. And the Scarberries and Mallettes were not finished with their Mothman search just yet. The following day, they returned to the old power plant where they found strange tracks around the building, and Steve went off to search the boiler room area by himself. He returned to the others, white as a sheet, and yelling that he had seen it in the boiler. On their way home, Linda reports seeing it inside one of the maintenance buildings, and she and Mary crying as Roger drove them home. They went to Linda's mother, and Linda went to pieces, and her father took her to the hospital, and on returning home, they claimed to have gotten no sleep once more. The next day, they returned to the power plant once more with reporters. The mysterious creature or figure was not spotted, but they all heard a clanging noise and found a boiler door open that Steve claims to have shut minutes earlier. That night, the four returned yet again, and Linda reports seeing the now infamous figure behind a fence and some trees, stating, "To me, it just looks like a man with wings. It has a body-shaped form, it was dirty gray in color, with wings on its back that came around it. It has muscular legs like a man and fiery red eyes that glow when the lights hit it." An important note here is that she immediately clarifies there was no glowing about it until the lights hit it, and that she cannot see its head or arms, and that she doesn't know if its eyes are even in a head. Now, this is going to be very important later on when we get to more discussions on what many people think are some possible Mothman explanations. They do state that they only saw the red glow whenever the light was pointed at the creature. The description of it not really being able to see defined shoulders and everything is also pretty important to one of the explanations as well. The accounts of Roger Scarberry and Mary Mallette pretty much corroborate entirely Linda's story and description, with Roger stating that the creature stood approximately 6 feet tall, 2 red eyes, 2 inches in diameter, 6 to 8 inches apart, with a wingspan of 10 feet. And Mary adds in her statement, "I could see the complete outline of it in the eyes, but I could not see any head. When you see something like this, you will never forget it." One oddity that I thought is there doesn't seem to be anywhere online, and in Point Pleasant at the Mothman Museum, the original handwritten statements from these initial witnesses from the Scarberries and Mallettes are on display. Steve's is not on display there, Steve Mallette, and I can't find a transcription of that one online anywhere, which seems very strange, and I'm not sure if that is because there is some reason him or his family or he himself or somebody of the Mallette family doesn't want it on display or publicly available, or even if they have that choice. I mean, I guess maybe they would. Or if for some reason they didn't take a statement from Steve, which makes less sense to me. Obviously they would take the statements from everybody involved. I couldn't find any information about that except for maybe some brief snippets where in interviews or in the newspaper he's mentioned, and it seems like he just kind of echoes what we've already heard from Roger and Linda and Mary. And regarding their stories all matching up, that is one of the pros. That's one in the points column for the Mothman, because the statements were all taken separately from the 4 initial witnesses. So each one in a separate room, they write out their statements. They all match. Because obviously I think where you want to look with something like this is, were there any illicit substances involved? Were they high? Were they drunk? Were any of that? And this is another one in the column for the Mothman, because going to the police if you're in that state is probably not what you would want to do. But I don't know, maybe if you saw something crazy enough. But they do also explicitly state in their reports that they were not on any substances. Now, of course, I guess the counter argument to that is that we're just going to take their word for it. But it seems like that if there was a suspicion of that the police would have had some inkling about it and included it in their reports somewhere. That all being said, I'm not prepared to rule it out. Maybe they were. It's a small town. Everybody kind of knows everybody. And maybe somebody was like, hey, we're just going to keep you a little more out of a little, you've had a rough night. You're clearly out of sorts. We're just going to keep you out of the legal side of trouble. So I think that would be a pretty reasonable thing that would happen. And kind of, if you read the interviews and the stories, it seems like everybody kind of knows everybody. And even going to Point Pleasant today, that it's a pretty small town, and you have to think that in 1966, it is probably even smaller, closer, tight-knit community than it is now. Either way, though, the accounts lining up, being given separately and written out and then compared, those lining up as well as they do, that is compelling. And again, we'll strike one in the column for the Mothman for that. And now there are many, many Mothman sightings, and we are not even going to come close to trying to discuss many of them. As a matter of fact, we're only going to discuss 2. So there have been hundreds, maybe a couple hundred, depends on the sources you check and what you will count as a Mothman sighting since 1966. But there's really only 2 that we're going to dive into. And the second one I think is pretty interesting. Happened on November 16th, one night after the initial sighting, and also while the Scarberries and Mallettes are going back and forth checking on things. It coincides with all of that, and I don't ever really hear anything about this one, but I've selected it because it was of the time of the creation of the Mothman myth. But we're going to talk about the story of Marcella Bennett. In addition to the Scarberries and Mallettes, on November 16, 1966, one day after their initial encounter the night before and after the first story in the papers, Marcella Bennett reported seeing the creature while traveling with her 2-year-old daughter Tina, brother Raymond Wamsley. Wamsley. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce that one. There you go. Sorry, Wamsley family. if it was Wamsley or and Raymond's wife, Kathy, to visit relatives who lived near the Point Pleasant's TNT area. When returning to their car around 9 p.m., Raymond was the first to notice and bring attention to the creature. Marcella was carrying her daughter and disregarded him at first before looking up and becoming paralyzed with fear at what she describes as a creature, over 6 feet tall with feathers. It looked like a giant bird, but yet a man, and it was standing with its shoulders arched and its neck down. I just stood there looking at it, but I couldn't figure out what I was seeing. The Wamsleys urged her to run and return to the house. Marcella finally turned to run, however tripped and fell atop her daughter. Marcella badly skinned her knees and hands in the fall, burning herself on her lit cigarette and hitting the side of her face, which began bleeding. She describes feeling as if she was in a trance and I just couldn't do what my mind was wanting me to do, and that she could hear the flapping of wings. After collecting herself, she returned to the house and they called the police, stating that they had seen the mysterious creature from the newspaper and that they could hear it on the porch pushing against the door and peering through the windows. Marcella described the event as the most frightening experience of her life and would sometimes believe she heard the flapping of its wings on their roof, and she never drove at night again out of fear. I couldn't imagine what this thing was or where it came from and what was its purpose. It was close enough to harm me, but it didn't. So I feel like Marcella's story is pretty action-packed. I think this is a really interesting one, and you never really hear anything about it, especially considering it was immediately the night after the famous sighting of the Mothman, the one that really got the moth mania pumping in everybody's veins. Maybe I'm just the one in the dark. Maybe I'm the asshole, but I've never heard of Marcella Bennett's story until I was doing some research on this. And I assume Tina was all right, the daughter that she fell on. There's no other information there. I assume we would know if something more happened with that. I mean, it was a 2-year-old, her 2-year-old daughter. I guess our thoughts and prayers can go out to Tina tonight. I hope that you survived the Mothman encounter unscathed and in good health. So over the next 13 months, following these initial reports, there would be somewhat over like 200 sightings, reported sightings, alleged sightings of the Mothman in and around the Point Pleasant area, and a little more widespread. And the papers were going wild. The Mothman name was coined, from the best I could tell, by an anonymous editor at one of the papers somewhere. So, kudos to that guy, because it stuck around. But suffice it to say, the papers and the people could not get enough of this Mothman. Oh, and the best that I could find for like why Mothman is it sounded kind of like Batman. Batman was a popular name. Batman's a cool dude. Mothman, it's got the alliteration. It's kind of like Batman. There doesn't seem to have been much more to it than that, because he's not very moth-like. He's not bat-like either. Very bird-like, but we're gonna return to the bird-like. Don't worry. We're coming back to that.
Why didn't they do Birdman?
Because that's a Michael Keaton film. Anyways, the papers and the people, they couldn't get enough of this guy. They were loving. The speculation was wild. UFOs, some sort of man bird, some sort of creatures, maybe something mutated from a nuclear waste, or some leftover at the TNT area. I guess that probably wasn't nuclear, but the people's imaginations were wild. Maybe it could be some bird-like creature, or maybe just a bird. The Mothman mania remained pretty strong all up to December 15th, 1967, when an actual very real tragedy struck Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And following that, the reports really tapered off. At approximately 5 p.m., the Silver Bridge running across the Ohio River to Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed, plunging 31 vehicles and 64 people into the 44-degree water in what is the deadliest bridge disaster in U.S. history. Forensics investigating the I-bar chain suspension-style bridge discovered that the cause of the collapse was an approximately 2.5 millimeter crack, a stress fracture, in one of the bearing loops of the I-bars. And not only could this minor imperfection over time not have been discovered prior to the bridge collapse due to its location, but even if it had been, it would have been impossible to repair, as it would have involved dismantling a portion of one of the 2 sections of the I-bar chains that were necessary to hold up the bridge, as no redundant sections of I-bar were run across the bridge. The incident did lead to much greater scrutiny of bridge building in the US and was the impetus for the National Bridge Inspection Standards. Following this tragedy, the news of the Mothman all but stopped in and around Point Pleasant, with the stories becoming few and far between. And the reasonable among us would probably nod and be like, yes, the Mothman kind of outlived his time and usefulness as a fun story, a fun diversion, uh, a story that's kind of putting your small town on the map and making it the topic of conversation. However, others would have you believe that the town did not move on from Mothman. Mothman moved on from the town of Point Pleasant. And this is where we get the theory that the Mothman is a dark harbinger, bringing tragedy, bringing doom wherever he appears. However, right in contrast to that, this also brings about the other theory of the Mothman, that he is a benevolent force come to warn us, though he lacks the sophisticated words and human language and communicative ways to express to the lowly humans the nature of what's about to happen, or that they should be prepared. And then once his time has finished, he flutters away with his Mothman feathers, according to our witnesses, and leaves us, perhaps fluttering back away to his home, to his lair, wondering why. Why don't they listen? Why do they choose not to hear my words, not to hear my prophecies? I've come to save them, but they choose death. And in following from these disaster-based theories, you also get theories that the Mothman appeared around Chernobyl and 9/11 and all these other disasters. Oh, and there was also that spurt of sightings around 2016, 2017 in Chicago, but there was no disasters and nothing much came of that really, including evidence. And while from then on the Mothman sightings would be pretty sparse, it seems that the big, bold, beautiful winged creature is here to stay, somewhat in no small part to the 1975 book about the Mothman and the happenings in Point Pleasant by John Keel called The Mothman Prophecies, and also the source material for the 2002 film starring Richard Gere and Laura Kinney that I would give you a review for right here real quick if I were a better host and had actually watched it. I had actually planned to watch it before we went to Point Pleasant, but I never got around to it. And to be honest, the trailer doesn't look that good, but I mean, I feel like older movie trailers never look that good. Anyway, this is a whole sidebar. Maybe at some point if I watch it, I'll do a quick review on it. Maybe, I don't know. I wouldn't hold your breath for that. That really, I think, helped solidify Mothman. That kind of brought him back into the public eye. Also in 2002, same time as the movie, Point Pleasant had its first annual Mothman Festival, which happens in September. That is not the year that the world's only Mothman museum opened. It was shortly thereafter. You can go and visit it. We did while we were there. It was very fun. They have on display the original handwritten accounts by the Scarberries and Mallettes, minus Steve, on display at the museum. So that was very cool to see that. They have tons of props from the movie. That's pretty cool. They've got all kinds of artwork. They've got some models. They also have a whole section of the museum, not a whole section, they have a little part of the museum that's focused on the Men in Black, which apparently had some roles to play here. I don't know enough about that. It's not really going to be a subject of this video, but pretty interesting, something to look into if you're into the Men in Black or want to know more about the whole Point Pleasant and Mothman experience. Mary Hyre, we didn't talk about her at all. There are some other players around Point Pleasant that were kind of important to the story or to the spread of it. We didn't really get to touch on here, but it was a pretty big volume of work if you really want to dig super deep into it. But you know, just some names to throw out there if you really want to get into it for further research. And of course, while we were there, we took a walk around the Point Pleasant downtown area after leaving the Mothman Museum. And right around the corner, they've got the Mothman statue, stunningly shiny and silver with piercing red eyes.
The best ass.
Juiciest ass.
It's a really good ass. I touched it. AJ did other things to it.
And whenever you see an ass that juicy, you can't help but dine in. And when you're done there, you can step right on across the street and wash it down with the Coffee Grinder's Mothman brew. And treat yourself to a little Mothman stack with the Mothman cookies. They've got the Mothman cupcake. They got the Mothman droppings. I didn't have those. I think they're just chocolate. They're chocolate covered something. I actually don't know what they are. I just had a weird moment of like social anxiety panic because I didn't see that they were there. I knew of them. And then I ordered my stuff and then I realized they were there and I thought it was going to be too much because I had the Mothman shirt and I ordered everything Mothman on the menu except those. And then I didn't want to go back and add them. So I didn't get the Mothman droppings. I don't know what they are. They're chocolate covered something. Sorry, everyone. The coffee was fine though. And the other snacks were good. They were generous with the delicious frosting on the cupcake. I did not care for the red eyes on the Mothman cookie though. I don't know what those little red candies were, but to hell with those. And after we left there, we could not go to Village Pizza and order the Mothman pizza, rivaled in size only by the ass of the actual Mothman. And we dug into that one too. How was it? It's like 90% mushrooms. Oh, not really. There's a ton of mushrooms on it.
The wings were mushrooms.
Basically, the wings and the body are mushrooms. And he's got spindly little bell pepper legs with
olive eyes.
Well, I'm pretty sure the eyes are meant to be tomatoes, right? Because he has red eyes. I think ours had olives or something. It wasn't tomatoes. It made me wonder, maybe they were out of tomatoes that day or something, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to have tomato red eyes in honor of the red eyes of the Mothman.
It was just okay.
It was certainly a novelty food, but whenever you're there, when you're in Mothman Town, you got to get the whole experience. So got to get the Mothman pizza. As we discussed, the Silver Bridge did collapse. They did not rebuild the Silver Bridge. They did build the Silver Memorial Bridge too far from the location, so we rode across that. We did go and visit Gallipolis. And then we came back through Point Pleasant and found our way to the McClintock Wildlife Preserve, which is where the TNT area from the Scarberry and Mallette story is located. It's down deep in this wilderness preserve. It is finding it was a little bit of a hell of a task that I do not think we would have accomplished, but for some serendipity. We were on our way. What I saw while driving was a turtle crossing the road. I just thought it was a big ass turtle. It's a wildlife preserve. Turtles can get big. I don't know. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna help this guy across the road. That's like the thing to do, right? You help turtles because they're like slow as hell. So I got out and I went to go check on the turtle. He's got his ridged shell and his fucking dinosaur tail and like his big like beak. And I'm like, man, I don't know about this. But I was gonna try it. I was like, I'll just get behind him and it'll be fine. I'll pick him up. Like, what can he do? I'll just pick him up from behind. We'll move him. He was not thrilled. He was not happy at all with my presence. So I walked up behind him, went to grab, he strikes. But whenever he strikes, he lifts his whole body just like off the ground and back down. And I'm like, I don't know about this. And I became weak and I was going to leave him there and be like, I don't know if we should do this. Let's just drive around.
Grip him and go.
He needs to go out of the window.
Just grab him from the back and rush over.
Another vehicle was coming and the turtle was more in its lane. These were very narrow roads in here. But anyway, yeah, I moved up behind him and he was not happy. The other car was stopped across the road and the social anxiety would not let me look at the person in that car to see if they were laughing or if they were afraid or if they were just like, what the fuck is this person doing? I didn't look at them ever. I just knew there was a vehicle there and they stopped because there was a man and a turtle in the road. So I got behind this guy, this turtle. I grabbed it by the shell on the back carefully, and I would have to take like 2 steps holding him way out from me and set him down, take a step back, and then dash up and grab him again by the back of the shell like as best as I could where I felt safe. And I just did that like 3 or 4 times until I got him over into the grass on the other side of the road. So he made it. In doing this, I didn't get snapped. I didn't really get hurt, but his back leg, while he was trying to kind of scamper out, his toenail did slit the tip of my finger, and it wasn't that bad, but it was bleeding. It was just bleeding kind of a lot down my hand. So I got back in the car. We pulled up just a little bit and stopped so that we could clean my finger and bandage it up. And that's whenever we ran into
He was great.
He was great, but whenever you first are in the backwoods of West Virginia, you've just been injured by the wildlife. Person drives up and like, "Hey, y'all doing all right over there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we just, we have to move the snapping turtle." And he was like, "All them snapping, all you gotta do is you just grab them by the tail and you just hold them up. They'll hiss and snap and they'll go crazy, but they can't do nothing for you." And I was thinking like, well, it's too fucking late for this information now, but I will never forget it if I have another wrangle with a snapping turtle. We had the Mothman. My wife and I each had matching Mothman shirts, and so obviously he was just like, "Y'all here to see the Mothman?" And I was like, his voice wasn't quite that high pitched, but
He did have a very thick, like, West Virginia accent, though.
yeah, that I'm failing to reproduce. So obviously we told him, yes, we're here for the Mothman. And he was like, "Y'all been to the igloos?" Which is what they call the TNT bunkers because of their kind of igloo-esque shape. And we're like, "Well, no, that's actually what we're here for. We're trying to find some of them down here." And he was like, "Oh, they're all down out here. Like, I can, if y'all are heading that way, I can show you if you want to follow me." And I was just like, oh my God, this is like a horror movie in the making. I looked over at Blair because I didn't shake my head initially. I was honestly expecting kind of like a no, like just like a look that said no, but I didn't get that. And then like I was in and then I didn't know what to do. And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Take us on down there."
Yeah, I think G passed the vibe check for me. He seemed all right.
I wasn't sure, but we followed him. He took us down a ways, and then we took like another turn going deeper into the wildlife preserve. And then he pulled over at this one spot and he pointed out this path where we were. And he told us that further down the road, there were more of those offshoots. And basically he was just saying that there's tons of those out there, the igloos. He showed us the path that was easiest to walk down. So we took a little walk and went to 3 or 4.
3 or 4 back there. And for the most part, they were fine. One of them gave me the creeps.
It was very interesting to go to those, and I don't know if we have anything that really captures this effect, but it was really fun to talk in them just because of the echo was unlike any echo I've ever heard in anything. I don't know how to describe that unless you were just there. It's weird. It's like you can feel the reverberations while you're in there because it's so enclosed. Oh, it sounds weird to walk in here. It's not as tall as I thought it would be.
And it feels bigger than what it actually is.
It's just like woo, 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 woo every time you say something.
Like you would speak and then you could feel the echo like in your teeth.
My teeth were fine, but it was really fun. It was really cool. We saw some cranes out there, right?
No, we saw some geese.
We saw some geese out there.
There's some Canadian geese out there.
That's pretty much it. That covers all the highlights for everything we did in and around Point Pleasant,
it took a
right?
whole day to do. Like we left kind of like mid-morning and we didn't get back until after it got dark. We were staying in another town in West Virginia. And I mean, we also went to like a little antique store that was nearby. It was like right next to the museum, I think. Yeah, Point Pleasant's cute. Really cute little town.
So yeah, it was a good trip. It was a fun trip. I do recommend it. But now, for all of you that stayed until the end of the video, what is the Mothman? What could the Mothman be? So, the explanations for the Mothman, there's a few theories. One that's very prevalent is that, actually pretty much all of them involve it not being a supernatural creature. Very popular explanation, it was a sandhill crane. They can be very tall, they have a very big wingspan, but they don't look much like they could match the description of the Mothman in just about any way. Except for they do have some, I wouldn't call them legs like a man, but they do have like some long, spindly, non-feathered legs. And then there is the explanation that maybe it was an owl, a barred owl, which is apparently pretty prevalent in the area, has an extremely red eye shine. And they do mention in the initial reports that the eyes were only red whenever the lights hit them. Barred owls are roughly like 16 to 23 inches tall with a 3 foot or so wingspan. The other possible bird that I see mentioned a lot is the good old poke.
It's the shite poke.
Yeah, it's the shite poke. I mean, I don't know what else to say about this thing. He's there, and those are in and around West Virginia, known to be in West Virginia. So the biggest attractors of the sandhill crane point out that those aren't native to that area. They're not commonly found there, and at the time, none had been reported being seen in the area. I think that is a big plus to the theory that it could be a sandhill crane, because these people are seeing something in the dark that they don't know what it is. They haven't seen it before. They don't have this big ass bird here all the time, and they just see it a little bit, and then what happens when they return, but they see a different large bird. They see an owl. And that's where they get the red eye shine, the description that it looks like it doesn't have a neck and stuff like that. I don't know, birds can be weird. Sometimes some weird shit just happens. I know a person, one of my best friends, like an emu came up to his door and was like pecking on it. They didn't have emus. Like somebody down the street did. And it was the night right after. And I think this supports the sandhill crane a little bit too. If it happened the night after the Scarberries and Mallettes, that crane is still hanging around. I mean, it's just the next night. So maybe they see it there. And the thing is like, I don't know, maybe it's scared. And it's just like, fuck all y'all. Like, I don't want to be here. What is going on? But the detractors say not native to the area. But they are known to be found in Illinois and Ohio, and Ohio is like, take the pigskin, toss it about a quarter mile, you'll hit Ohio. Like, it's right fucking there. Other explanations for it being in the area, or maybe it was on their migratory path and it got separated from the herd. Bird's flock. It got separated from the flock and instead of the bird herd, and ends up in West Virginia. But yeah, I think those are I just think that's the most likely situation, the most likely explanation. There are some other like this. So I watched this video where this one dude, he performed an experiment that kind of had a good idea, but I feel like the execution was a little half-baked and way too few of a sample size of people trying. I think he had like 4 or 5 people drive the course. But anyway, he was trying to make a point that if you're in the dark and you see something when you're not expecting it, your mind can really exaggerate the size of things. So he created these Mothman cutouts with like bicycle reflectors for the eyes on them. And he made one that was, I don't remember the sizes. They were something like 2 foot, 4 foot, 6 foot, something like that. They may have been like 2, 5, 10 or something. As people drove by, he would ask them to afterwards rate the sizes that they thought they were. They had to point out before they saw them that they were coming up on one. I don't know exactly what would be the best way to conduct this experiment, but I think that the idea is there, but you would want way larger sample size, and you would want a course where somebody only rides down the course. This one only has the smallest Mothman statue, and then they drive through, and then at the end, they rate if they saw it. You don't tell them where it is. They rate if they saw it, and they rate what size they thought it was. They don't get to drive the other courses, and they're not all on the same course like they were in this experiment. And then you would have a course for the medium and a course for the large. People only get to do one of them and then record their perceptions on the one they got to do. You get a large enough sample size, you maybe get some meaningful data. Are you really going to go through all this effort and then like just drop the ball at the end? Whenever you actually conduct the experiment, possibly required more. What I'm describing would require way more resources than what they displayed there. That could have been the holdup. Maybe they thought about the same thing too. Who knows? This is the first episode back in a while. I would like to thank Blair, my wife. I'm married since the last time I was on here. If you're a return viewer, for helping me out with this one behind the camera. I know the question will come up about Jared and Nathan. Where are Jared and Nathan? We are still best buds. We just saw each other not long ago. We stay in regular touch. We don't live as locally to each other anymore, but if you're missing the boys, let them know in the comments. Jared, Nathan, we miss you. That's the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that I'm not too far out of practice for this. I hope that it was at least somewhat entertaining, that it was informative, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Before I go, I would like to take a moment just to shout out a couple of streams and channels where you can sometimes find me. I have them posted on screen here, and they will have convenient links down in the description, one of which is a new collaboration with A Rambling Voice, where we can upload various videos and projects. Friend is a collaboration with Jason of Mifu Gaming. We haven't had any updates in a while, but there is a nice backlog of fun videos there, and you can sometimes catch me on my friend's streams listed here or very occasionally on my own neglected Twitch channel. And thank you once again for watching the Boo Review.